right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Morgan Crossman, and I'm the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures. I want to welcome everybody to our May State Advisory Council meeting and just give you a quick orientation to the agenda for today. Generally, our board consists of 23 members, but because we are holding this very public meeting today focused on early childhood investment, we are planning to have 60 or more attendees to be a part of the discussion today. But our agenda for today's meeting will include general SAC business in addition to roll call. We'll also do a brief overview of the Building Bright Futures State Advisory Council role in state and federal statute, really focused on our work to align our different funding priorities with the Vermont Early Childhood Strategic Plan in focusing specifically on Goal 4, which is that the early childhood system will be well integrated, well resourced, and data informed. We'll also have a brief review from some of our agency leadership talking about what is known about current existing state and federal investments, as well as what to expect on the horizon over the next few months and as we look into the next few years of early childhood funding. We'll also have two of our key partners give examples of the impact of successful COVID-19 investments, as well as upcoming initiatives and what to be paying attention to over the summer. And then the last piece of today's meeting is really critical. So for those of you who think you need to jump off before 2:30, please stay on because we are going to be engaging in a brainstorm and discussion of the priorities and needs. Both for state and federal investments, but also work to document the gaps that remain. A couple of housekeeping items as we move through the agenda today. Please keep your microphone on mute throughout the meeting. We will do a State Advisory Council roll call and introductions of new SAC members. If you're not a member during that time, we do want to ask that you introduce yourself in the chat bar for today's meeting. So both your name, which member or which section of the BBF network you are a part of, whether it is our regional councils, our VCAP committees, whether you're a parent or an early childhood member across different sectors. When we get to the voting section of today's meeting, if you're not a member of the SAC, please turn off your camera at that time. And then we will call a formal vote. For all those in favor, say aye or give a thumbs up. And then for any of those who are abstaining or opposed to any of our voting language, please vote verbally so that we make sure that we see and hear you. All right, so before we get fully started into the meeting, for those of you who have not attended a BBF meeting in a while, we do start with a mindful moment. So I'm going to ask Amanda Biggs, who is our regional coordinator from Chittenden, to lead us through that moment.
Thank you, Morgan. Hello, everybody. Today's mindful moment comes from a mindfulness adventure series for young children called The World of Amy, which focuses on the power of imagination. So I'm going to invite you to turn off your camera and play along. Have you ever watched a leaf dancing in the wind, swirling, floating, gliding, this way, that way, and softly landing on the grass, on a beach, or at your feet? It makes me wonder, who or what is guiding or directing that leaf? Do you think the trees and the wind, or the branches, or the people are the reasons the leaf goes where it goes? Or do you think the leaf decides how it moves and where it ends up? Let's be leaves together for a moment in our minds. Take a few slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out your mouth. Breathe in and out. In and out. And one more breath in and out. Your breath is like an anchor, helping you come gently into yourself. You are slowing down, feeling calm, welcoming yourself within. Now, imagine yourself as a leaf. Maybe you're a small, bright green leaf in the backyard next to your treehouse. Maybe you're a huge, dark, wet leaf in a rainforest jungle. Or maybe you're a colorful leaf in the pile on the ground in fall. Whatever kind of leaf you feel like, imagine you are still. a still leaf. There is nothing outside moving you. You are weightless in the air, floating in time. Float like a leaf. Now find a place within you to center. Notice the large vein that runs from the stem to the tip of your leaf body. When you feel steady, notice the rest of your leaf. Feel the energy moving through your veins. Something is stirring. Now you are a stirring leaf, awake and alive. Almost like there is a roadmap written in your cells. You are being called on your path, sensing deeply, seeing clearly, feeling fully. Bring your focus back to breathing. In and out, slowly. One more time. Notice the wholeness of you, your center, the stillness, and the stirring inside. You are held and guided. Feel the goodness surrounding you like a hug from the earth, grounding you and giving you wings. Silently or out loud, say to yourself, as I move through the world, I am not led by every passing gust. I make choices from deep inside, a place of wisdom and trust. You know, sometimes it feels like life isn't up to us. Oh, but it is. It is. We are mighty like the leaves. We get to decide where we dance, what we create, and where we end up. It comes from deep inside our being, and there is goodness everywhere, guiding us along. Let's take one more deep breath. Open your eyes and turn your videos back on.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I really hope that all of you who are joining us for this call took that moment to actually take some deep breaths and not fire off a couple more emails, because it is really important as we come into this space. Often we are asking you at this virtual table to engage in really challenging discussions and to do strategic planning or visioning. And it's really important, just like I work to instill in my 3.5-year-old feisty child, to self-regulate and to calm and reset as she's starting something new. So I really appreciate all of you coming together to take that moment with us. So now we're going to jump in. I'm going to transition the floor to Chloe Leary, who is the co-chair of our board, to walk us through our roll call.
Great, thanks, Morgan. Hi, everybody. I'm Chloe Leary. I'm the private co-chair of the State Advisory Council. And just a reminder for those of you who are not State Advisory Council members, if you take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're from, what hat you're wearing, that would be great. So thank you for that. I am going to start with, I'm going to try to see your faces too, because this is great to see everybody. Cheryl Wilcox, are you here? If you'd unmute and say hi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Department of Mental Health.
And then Renee Kelly, are you with us? Miranda Gray.
Hi, nice to see everyone from the Child Development Division.
Nice to see you. Ken Jones.
Yeah, this is Ken Jones. I'm from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Okay, nice to see you. And Wendy Trafton.
Hi, my name is Wendy Trafton. I'm the Deputy Director of Healthcare Reform within the Agency of Human Services.
Nice to see you. Welcome. Kate Rogers.
Hi all, it's Kate Rogers, Agency of Education.
Hi, Kate. Alyssa Stahlberg. Elisa, I always say that wrong. I'm so sorry. Or Janet.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa Stolberg from the Vermont Department of Health.
And Representative Jessica Brumstead.
Hi everyone, it's Jessica.
Nice to see you. Eddie Gale.
Hi, Eddie Gale. I'm with the A.D. Henderson Foundation.
Eddie. And Allie Richards.
Hi, Allie Richards with Let's Grow Kids. Good to see everybody.
Emily Merrill. Emily here today? Not yet. Lexi Duquette. So there are two parent representatives. Hopefully they'll be able to jump on and join us. Dr. Ashley Miller.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ashley Miller from South Royalton Health Center, General Pediatrician.
Nice to see you. Welcome. Rebecca Webb.
Hi, I'm Becca Webb. I am representing Act 166 folks.
Rebecca. Mike McRae.
Hi, folks. Mike McGrath. I work for the Vermont Principals Association.
Mike, welcome. Paul Dragon.
Hi, everybody. Paul Dragon. I'm with CVOEO. Good to see everybody.
Nice to see you. Amy Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Amy Johnson, Vermont Parent-Child Center Network.
And Christy Swenson.
Hi, I'm Christy. I represent Head Start.
And Flora Diaz-Smith.
Hi, everybody. Flora Diaz-Smith, Vermont School Boards Association. It's nice to see everybody.
And our new treasurer. Thank you for taking that on. So welcome, everybody. We're really excited, especially for the new folks who have joined us. It's great to have you all here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chloe. I do want to note that Lexi and Emily, who are our two parent representatives, aren't able to be on today or will be joining a little bit late. The only other introduction I want to make briefly is to Kendall Smith, who's the Director of Policy and Development and Legislative Affairs for Governor Scott. So Kendall will be joining the SAC as a non-voting member to ensure that we are having alignment with the governor's office and priorities as we move forward with early childhood initiatives. So Kendall, if you want to jump on and say hi.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And Morgan, you already introduced me, so it's nice to be here. You guys may be more familiar with Ethan Latour, who had this position from our office previously. He has since moved on to other things. And so anyway, I'm happy to be here and looking forward to this first meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll transition to Beth to talk a little bit more about some of our working agreements for newcomers.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm going to bring back the screen share, so let me do that. Okay. So as we get started with SAC business and come back together, we are thrilled to have new members and are reminded that sometimes in groups that we work with, we have some unspoken culture of how we do business. And so especially as we welcome new people, trying to be clearer about what kind of culture we create to invite all voices who can come and share and be part of the BBF network. And so one thing that we would like to introduce are group working agreements. How many of you use some type of group working agreements or group norms, you might call them, as a way to get the full range of voices in our discussions together. So I'm going to read a couple of working agreements that we have used previously that seem to work. See if there's anything that's missing that we would like to add, and then ask for agreement from SAC members that we can adopt these working agreements, and we will share them at the beginning of meetings to remind us. So we have listen for understanding, not disagreement. Consider the opinions and experiences of others. Be mindful of the difference between intent and impact. Step up and step back, taking turns and sharing the room together. Tolerate ambiguity. A lot of our work, we don't have all the answers, right? But are working on it together. Lean into discomfort. Bring a spirit of experimentation and creativity. Remember that what we hear is often more important than what we say. Honor complexity and the fact that as individuals, we do not know it all, and share responsibility for success. I'll give you a moment to digest that and ask if there's any clarification to any of these or any additions. Okay, well, we will try these for this meeting. Can you either use your, you can give me a verbal thumbs up or just for me to get a sense that people are paying attention to these and willing to use these, or verbal or a signal on your, all those thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you very much. And feedback is welcome. If there's something else that comes up that you'd like us to add to this list for a future meeting, please send me a message. I am going to hand it back to Chloe for a couple more pieces of business.
Great, thanks, Beth. We need to vote to approve the March minutes. Did everybody get a copy of the March minutes that we know of? Okay. Hope you had a chance to look at them. I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the March State Advisory Council minutes. If I could get someone on the council to make that motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Fleur. Any discussion? All those in favor, thumbs up or a thumb motion of approval? Any opposed?
I will
Anybody?
abstain. Ken Jones abstains.
Okay, one abstention.
And Eddie Gale's going to abstain because I think I was voted on at that time.
Thanks, Eddie. All right. Anybody else before we move on to approving? March minutes are approved. And last month we voted on new members and the slate of the executive committee. And this month we are bringing forward the nomination of Emily Merrill to the executive committee. So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve Emily Merrill to join the executive committee. Somebody would make that motion.
So
I'll make that motion.
Oh.
Thank you. How about a second? Christy second. So Eddie made the motion, Christy second. Any discussion? All those in favor, a thumbs up or some signal of approval? I'm seeing lots of thumbs. And anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? All right, well, thank you. Welcome, Emily, to the executive committee, and I will hand it back to Morgan to continue. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm really excited about that addition to the executive committee. So for those of you who are new to the board, we do have an executive committee of both public and private partners. And this is the first time that we have a parent representative joining our executive committee, which has really been something that we in the BBF network has prioritized, is how do we actually create strong partnerships and leadership opportunities for families and parents who are engaged in our network. So thank you. In this next couple of minutes, I do want to take some time to describe some organizational updates that we have been working to strengthen in the BBF network. So I'm not going to put up a slide share for this one, but for those of you who are not as familiar with the network, when I say the BBF network, I'm talking about the State Advisory Council, which is the group that came together here that you just heard make introductions. 7 Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees that are monitoring progress towards Vermont's Early Childhood Strategic Plan, and 12 regional councils that come together within regions to document the gaps, the priorities, and actually have that solid understanding of what's happening on the ground and how our system works to support kids and families within every region of the state. So we've really been working to think about in this past year, especially coming out of this pandemic, how do we strengthen every single layer of that network? So some of the things that we'll be talking about in the next 3 months is how we support the different layers of that network infrastructure. At Building Bright Futures, we have 10 staff that support the entire network at any given time. And that network captures over 450 people that come together every single month to be doing this work. So moving forward, we are going to have 4 directors supporting all of the policy work. And when I say the policy work, I'm talking about the State Advisory Council, the VCAP committees, testimony, and anything related to monitoring and data to inform policy, as well as communications and development activities. And then in addition to that 4-person team, we'll have 4 regional managers that will be really charged with supporting the entire regional council network infrastructure. And then in addition to that team of 8, we'll have 2 part-time administrative managers who are really supporting the finance and day-to-day operations of the network. And we'll dive a little bit into that during the July meeting where we ask you to vote on this year's budget. And so for those of you who have not been as actively involved in our budget, this year we've done a really significant job diversifying our fiscal year 22 budget. And as we think about that budget, we're projecting about $1.3 million for fiscal year 22. And one of the most important pieces of this budget for me is that we've now built a 5-year projection. So not only are we talking about fiscal sustainability for 22, but we've built out what this will look like and what our goals are for the next 5 years. And we are really excited to announce that the state of Vermont has increased our legislative allocation. So for those of you who didn't know what that was before, we received $244,000 for the state of Vermont, which was only about 18% of a $1.3 million budget. In the budget that is now on the governor's desk, that has increased to $505 annually for Building Bright Futures, which is a very significant amount of work on behalf of so many of the partners that are on the call today. So I just wanted to publicly thank everybody who has been such a strong supporter in either developing that budget, really increasing the narrative for how we talk about the importance of this network, the work that's being done, and communicating that in the legislature. So Jessica Brumstead, really quickly want to say thank you so much for all of your work to present this and talk about it so eloquently within the legislature, and really be our champion for early childhood. So just as a reminder, we will bring that fiscal year 22 budget to the State Advisory Council for a vote at our July 6th meeting. And so we are having a very short business meeting that is going to be on a Tuesday. And the reason for that meeting is because we want to be very sure that the ink has dried on the governor's budget before we ask you to vote on our budget. So once that has formally passed, we will ask you to sign off on our budget, and we'll get that invitation out shortly. So I appreciate your flexibility there. I want to transition to the bulk of our agenda for today, which is really talking about early childhood priorities and investments as we move through and out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the next section of our discussion is really going to be focused on what we know about existing and forthcoming federal investments and how we can really leverage those to meet the needs of the early childhood arena in Vermont. For new board members or folks joining us from outside of the network, I want to reground everyone in Building Bright Futures' role in statute. So both in state and federal statute, specifically in the state statute under Title 33, Chapter 46, we are named to really partner with agency secretaries and leaders to coordinate existing early childhood budgets and policies, and to develop an early childhood budget and recommendations that reflect the funding and priorities identified in our systems plan. And when we say systems plan, we're talking about Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan, or the VCAP. And this is definitely an area of growth for the BBF network. So what we've seen in the past few years is that there's been pretty significant transition in state government leadership and at BBF. And with the increase of support from the legislature, as well as a really strong diversification of our funding across the board, we are really focused on building our capacity to support the investment side of the Building Bright Futures work. So for today's meeting, we are going to reinvigorate this conversation with the State Advisory Council as one of many discussions that will happen over the course of the year, not just at the SAC level, but also within our VCAP committee tables about fiscal sustainability for our early childhood system. One of the reasons this is so important is because, again, we're looking at the end of our legislative session and seeing that our budget is going to soon pass. And that's happening at a really unprecedented time in history, where due to the pandemic, we are having a surplus in the general fund and billions of dollars coming into the state to support recovery and rebuilding. And so as we're thinking about investments, I want to remind folks that we just completed an early childhood needs assessment and found that our entire early childhood system is chronically underfunded, but that we've also identified some significant areas of needs and gaps. And then alongside that, that needs assessment, we had an update to Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan, which is a 5-year action plan that is supposed to be serving as a guide for how we are making decisions around funding and priorities. So for those of you who are not as ingrained in this action plan as Beth and I are, we do want to remind folks about the vision that we've created collectively to move the early childhood field forward. And that vision is that Vermont aspires to realize the promise of each and every Vermont child by ensuring that the early childhood system is integrated, continuous, comprehensive, high quality system of services that's equitable, accessible, and will improve outcomes for children in the prenatal period to age 8 and their families. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now is the framework for the VCAP. So on the right, you're seeing concentric circles that show how children are nested within these broader layers of the early childhood network. And we've mapped every goal in our strategic plan to a level of that network. So goal 1 is that all children have a healthy start. Goal 2 is that families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being. Goal 3 is that all children and families have access to high quality opportunities that meet their needs. And goal 4 is really at the systems level, and that's that the early childhood system will be integrated, well-resourced, and data informed. And so our conversation today is really about how we focus on making change across the layers of our network infrastructure through investments. How do we ensure that we are well-resourced across different layers of the infrastructure? And so as we're doing some brainstorming and discussions around the priorities and gaps in existing funding, I really want folks to think about these goals of the VCAP and where in the strategic plan are the gaps and priorities that you're identifying? How do they map to the strategic plan? So this is my invitation to you. If you have not done a deep dive into what the strategies and goals are within the strategic plan, please go in there and take a look. Because we really need to be thinking about how we move this vision forward with state, federal, and philanthropic investments. So for the next 15 minutes, I've asked several of our agency leaders to come and talk about what is known about existing and then on the horizon federal investments within different sectors. And so I'm going to ask folks to hold questions. So this is not the time to ask a range of questions about those federal dollars, but really listen to what is able to be funded and identify in this next section of the discussion, what are some critical one-time priorities and needs, as well as gaps that we're seeing emerge in state and federal investment. So we're going to stop the screen share. And we will hear from Cheryl Wilcox, who's the Interagency Planning Director for the Department of Mental Health. We'll hear from Miranda Gray, who's the Interim Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division, and Dr. Heather Boucher, who's the Deputy Secretary from the Vermont Agency of Education. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. It's always nice when it gets off the screen share and you can see so many faces again. So I wanted to provide some high-level information because I think folks have all seen that because of the American Rescue Plan Act, there are additional funds coming in, and the Department of Mental Health is lucky that we're going to be the recipient of some of those. So we, in general, every year get a mental health block grant, and it is funding. It's usually about $1.2 million. It's funding that goes out in the community for community-based mental health services and supports. This year, as of just last week, so hot off the press, we are getting an additional $2.4 million. So what we have to do and figure out is by the beginning of this July, we have to submit a plan to our federal partners. What that plan needs to look like is how we think about these funds going out in the community to really support children and adults. So all ages, this is across the age span, from the newest person in Vermont to someone who is aging in Vermont and needs additional services who has mental health challenges. So it is the full age span. And the way that we solicit feedback at the department is we have forums like this. So this timing was absolutely beautiful that Morgan and Beth were able to queue this up, because us hearing from stakeholders across Vermont, across all the age groups, helps us figure out the most effective way to use those funds. So our process looks like collecting ideas like we're going to hear today, hearing the feedback, really putting it together into proposals. And then we have a mental health block grant planning council that is actually having extra meetings right now. It's about 15 folks from all across the age spans, from our peer agencies that support folks, from our mental health agencies. And then we also have, at the Department of Mental Health, we have an adult and a children's standing committees, which are also advisory bodies. So those, a subset of those folks are part of the planning council for our mental health block grant every year. We will then be channeling all the ideas forward to them and really figuring out where we see need. So for instance, I think a lot of folks have probably seen in the media that we have a lot of children who have ended up in emergency departments in crisis, and we are trying to figure out really how to shift that. We don't want anyone sitting in an emergency department if they're having a mental health challenge. So there have been some alternative programs put into place. We're also talking about mobile response, which goes out to families. So rather than a family having to put a child in a car and drive somewhere, really having folks go to the family's home and or another place that works for them. So as we get all of these ideas together, we put it forth to our planning council, and then the final decision making sits with our commissioner of mental health. So it's quite a process. I will say there are some states that just write a plan. They get their additional funds and they write the plan. And it's not the way we want to do things. And this is additional funding, so we want to make sure we're even broader in soliciting feedback. So, you know, the other piece we often think about, and I think this is true for all of us when we're getting funds in, we know these funds have a beginning and an end. So for this the additional funds of the 2.4 million, we actually will have 4 years to spend it. And then we know that's the end, that will most likely go back to our regular 1.2 million in block grant funds. And so we have to also be thinking, if these are, with these one-time funds, how do we invest them so we're not then creating a cliff where there's great programming and we don't have a sustainability plan. So that's something we're also always thinking of. And there are times that one-time funds can really boost an infrastructure or a program or something else. And so that's the kind of thinking that will be incredibly helpful to us. We have a couple of other grants that are coming in around suicide prevention, and also some emergency grants we got last year. So the other piece I will say is that there may be things that fall in our mental health block grant, but we are also thinking of all the different funding streams coming in. So if there are other ideas today that maybe don't fit within the mental health block grant or those pieces, we're still looking across our funding streams. So I am just so appreciative to have such a large group of folks providing this. We'll be collecting it, looking at it at mental health, and bringing it to our planning council. So really appreciate the thinking, especially as we think about younger children and that investment and what a difference it makes long-term. So we're always trying to back up and focus more on younger children and doing prevention work, because that's really where we want to be prioritizing so that we get good outcomes long-term. So thank you all so much. I'm looking forward to hearing the ideas and seeing what comes of this.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I really appreciate you talking a little bit about the fact that there are, and we recognize there are one-time needs that may be applicable and may be available for one-time federal investment, and that there are also chronic other needs that we need to think about addressing. And so just so folks know, when we get to the brainstorming section of this, you will be able to identify whether or not you think the priority you're identifying falls into a one-time need, a longer term or chronic gap, or a bigger priority that we need to do some serious strategizing as a state. And we will capture all that information and provide it to our agency leaderships, and then agency leadership, but also continue talking about it with our VCAP committees and our private philanthropic partners. Okay, so next up, we're going to have a couple of remarks from Miranda Gray, who's the Interim Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division.
Thank you, Morgan. And thank you all for being here with us today. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights that you're going to provide. I thought I would start first with the program that the Child Development Division has running, which are COVID funds, and that is called CRSA. And so with its $12 million that we are currently providing to providers, and we have just under 800 providers that qualified for this program and sought it out. And that money goes to support PPE, capital improvements, rent, materials and supplies, wages and bonuses, and professional development, or TA. And this program runs through December of this year. So this is one that we currently have going. Then we also have about $47 million in American Rescue Plan Act money that is also coming into use and invest over the next 3 years, both to position Vermont to be able to support the immediate needs, but then also, investments for the future. As Cheryl mentioned, it is true for the Child Development Division as well, that these are one-time funds. So I think it's really critical that we're thinking about investments that we can make now. They'll truly make a difference, but same thing, they don't create cliffs for employees of childcare facilities or Vermonters that are accessing early childhood services. So I thought I would also share a little bit. So we have 3 different buckets of money that are coming in. I thought I would kind of give you what we know today about what these funds can support. So the first are stabilization funds. That is just over $29 million that will be coming in. And we have until September of 2023 to expend these funds. So this money is a bit unique, or I should say specific, in that we've received guidance that 90% of these funds need to go out to qualified childcare providers. So this is direct to, those that are existing businesses. I think it's as of like early March, you have to already be a childcare provider. And so these funds are not allowed to be used for startup businesses. So that was something that I felt was important, just kind of put out there. And then they also have some similarities to our CRSA program in what they can support. So that is, again, personnel, so payroll salaries, rent, PPE, cleaning and sanitizing supplies, equipment and supplies to respond to COVID-19, goods and services necessary to maintain or resume childcare services, and then mental health supports for children and employees. Next, we have our Child Care Development Block Grant. So these are funds that the division generally receives, but this is in addition to that, and that is just over $18 million. We have not received official guidance on these funds yet, so I'm telling you today what I know now, but also putting in that caveat of it could become more specific as we learn more. These funds have until September of 2024 to be expended. Typically, these funds can be used to support training and professional development for the childcare workforce, improving upon the development or implementation of TA to providers, developing and implementing or enhancing a tiered quality rating system, and improving the supply and quantity of childcare programs and services for infants and toddlers. So those are a couple of those examples. And the last ARPA money addition that we are receiving are the community-based child prevention program funds. So they're commonly known as CBCAP. For those that are familiar with the acronyms, I'm still learning all of them. So this is significantly less money. This is $380,000 to expend until September of 2025. And those, generally speaking, can be used to enhance community-based and prevention-focused programs, to support coordination of resources and activities, to better strengthen and support families to reduce the likelihood of abuse and neglect, and to foster understanding and appreciation of and knowledge of diverse populations. So you can see we have some pretty specific ways that we can spend money, but then also have some flexibility as we understand it today to be able to make investments that perhaps we've thought about doing in the past, but didn't have the funding at the time. On the idea boards that you'll see in a little bit, you will see what the division has identified as what we believe those needs are. So that's mental health supports for children and childcare employees. So some of this is feedback that we've already received from the field, but certainly, always things evolve. And so this is just, as also Cheryl had mentioned, one of the ways that we are really interested in getting stakeholder feedback. The division will find other ways to bring more people to the table so that we really know what is the need out there as we learn more about what our funding can support. Some of the other ideas that we had were workforce and professional development, data infrastructure, business acumen, and then just specifically around the stabilization funds and what does it mean now to use those funds to align with the Vermont Forward Plan. So what is that connection there? I just want to thank you all again for joining us today to help us understand what you see as the needs and gaps. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Miranda. All right, so for this last 5 minutes of this section, we have Dr. Heather Boucher, who's the Deputy Secretary of AOE.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here as well. It's a pleasure to be here. I thought I would start a little bit first with just a high level of Vermont's education recovery framework, because I think that is what is guiding the state's response to additional federal dollars that the education agency and local districts are receiving. And I apologize if you've already heard about this, but I just wanted to make sure that if folks hadn't, they had some kind of grounding in that. So before the third tranche of federal dollars, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a sec, was announced, was released, and so on, the State Agency of Education in Vermont had decided that we were going to really put forth a concerted effort around education recovery. Once we actually had gotten schools back opened up this academic year, we realized pretty quickly that not only were we faced with ensuring that, and when I say schools, I'm talking about pre-K through 12, just to clarify that. We needed to ensure that not only were we providing safe operational environments and logistics for students, but also needing to really planfully turn at some point toward what life would look like after COVID. So we started doing this work months ago and came up with a conceptualization that we talked an awful lot with a variety of different stakeholders on, and we all seem to agree on a tripartite recovery model. So we, in terms of Vermont's education recovery plan, we're focusing on 3 different areas of concern that will then be addressed with both federal and state dollars moving forward. So the 3 areas are mental health, social emotional learning, and well-being, student engagement, and truancy reduction, and then, of course, more standard academics and academic achievement and success. So the reason we wanted to make these 3 buckets very central and primary is that they're all pretty equally important as we navigate out of the pandemic. Many folks, and even nationally, many folks have jumped to thinking about learning loss and phrases like that. And our perspective really is that until you actually ensure that students are social emotionally okay and feeling pretty secure, you're not really going to get very far with addressing anything to do with academics. At the same time, we know that we can't wait if there has been, for instance, greater gaps, greater equity gaps in academics that we know has actually occurred this past year. And of course, students need to be engaged as well. So all 3 of these we view as very, very critical and equally important and needing to be addressed pretty much at the same time. So what we actually had our districts do is they had to do these state recovery plans, which they're in the middle of. And so the first phase was really, they were required to conduct a needs assessment, and these were actually completed and submitted earlier in this spring. And so they had to actually take a look at what data they had available for outcomes in each of those 3 areas, particularly student outcomes, as well as a needs assessment on their capacity and their resources to actually address the needs that they actually found. Next, in a very short while, due on June 1st, will be the district's plans based on those local needs assessments to actually address the needs that they identified. And of course, these will be leveraging what are called ESSER dollars. And it's the education something S support and recovery. I think I have to go back and look at the actual acronym. It's changed a bit. Education recovery, it's ESSER. So I'll shift a little bit and talk about those. There have been, as part of CARES, and then as part of the second package of federal dollars, and then as part of this latest tranche in ARP, each of those has come with a very sizable federal allotment to both our LEAs, local education agencies, which in Vermont are our school districts and supervisory unions, and also to the state education agency. So all told, the money has been just really, really substantial. So all told, it's been upwards, not quite, but around $400 million over those 3 buckets. What's really important to know is that 90% of those dollars is going directly to the districts, and you folks might already know about that. So, and the agency or the state is not actually allowed to direct how those funds are spent. They were meant to really go very quickly, very rapidly to local entities to get schools open. But because we're doing this recovery work, again, this would include pre-K, we really do want to ensure that the needs of our youngest and most vulnerable students are certainly met in these recovery plans. So just a couple more points I would make. This third bucket of federal funding requires both the state education agency, that is the AOE, and then also each of the local districts or supervisory unions to actually submit a plan to the federal US Department of Education on how they're going to spend this third bucket of money. So we're largely relying again on this fortuitous work that we had already done around recovery. We were one of the first states to move into that phase, largely because we were so good as a state in terms of navigating the pandemic. And just as an aside, a lot of the reason this money is so huge is because they were, at the beginning, they didn't really know how much to actually apportion for opening schools. And there are still a lot of districts that actually across the nation that have not actually opened. And so a lot of the money, you know, we've sort of benefited from it as a state, even though we did super well. So a lot of states are, you know, they'll be really flying through these hundreds of millions of dollars because they have not opened fully their schools, whether even virtual or in person. Students just have literally not been attending or being educated this past year, which is really, really awful. And we're really, you know, one of the bright sides of the way we've been able to navigate this pretty historic and awful situation is that we have been able, I think, to provide some stability to our education system. So as part of that, part of those plans that are actually required for us to actually fully leverage the third bucket of federal funding, we have to engage in stakeholder engagement. So the Agency of Education will have its own stakeholder engagement process. And I just wanted to clarify that because for me today, I'm not here, like this is not our stakeholder engagement. I'm just more here as an observer because we have to have a more coherent, equitable to be determined stakeholder engagement process that you'll hear a lot more about in the coming days. So I just wanted to clarify that. Having said that, I don't want folks to be shy about if there are issues relevant to the education system to, talking about them and hopefully just embedding them in the other pieces that you're actually working on. Each district must also engage in stakeholder engagement. And so I think that will be important to kind of keep your ear to the ground on in terms of those districts and schools that you work with most closely in your everyday roles. I think that's all I wanted to say, just a high level, and then I'm certainly going to be here if folks have questions.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that the State Advisory Council meeting is not the only place where we, across all levels, are engaging stakeholder feedback to support state agencies or leadership in decision-making around federal dollars. This is one very important and critical venue that we are doing that and starting that discussion, but please be on the lookout and we will do our best at BBF to be disseminating all of the different other mechanisms by which you can engage and provide feedback. So for the next 10 minutes, we're going to transition to hearing about the impact of some of the COVID-19 investments. And so first you're going to hear from Dr. Holly Morehouse, who's the Executive Director of Vermont After School. We are feeling that it's so critical to hear about Vermont After School's work in COVID-19 response. I want to make sure that everybody on the board, but also our community partners are aware, especially as we are transitioning to summer, what the different programs and resources that may be available much more broadly than we generally talk about. So at the board and across the across our early childhood network, we talk a lot about childcare. We talk a lot about education. We don't necessarily talk about out of school time care. And so really wanting to engage Holly and her team's expertise to say, how do we need to be thinking more holistically about how we're supporting children and families across the board as we're moving into the summer months. And we're also going to hear from Ken Jones, who is the Economic Research Analyst at the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development. He's also a member of the SAC, and we'll hear a little bit about some of the critical early childhood initiatives coming and supported by ACCD. So Holly, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So I'm the Executive Director of Vermont After School. We're a statewide nonprofit. It's been around since 2009, and we work with schools, community partners, teen centers, parks and rec, libraries, anybody who is working with children and youth outside the school day and over the summer, ages 5, really through high school and a bit beyond. We don't do anything in isolation. We work really closely with all of our state agency partners and others across the state. So there isn't any funding that I have to speak to that Miranda hasn't already mentioned or Heather hasn't already mentioned. We also work with the Department of Mental Health and Department of Health, State Treasurer's Office, and some others. So it's been a big year for after school and summer. I think, part of what we saw this year under COVID is that some of the problems we've always known about, this idea that once a child turns 5 and goes to kindergarten, it's public school and it's free and childcare is not an issue, really, right, is a myth, right? As anybody who's been around kids or has kids or family with kids, actually the logistics often get a lot tougher, even in a lot of ways, because you're no longer talking about a single childcare provider. You're talking about being one place in the school day and maybe somewhere else before school and somewhere after school. And then summer is 10 weeks where you're trying to fill with a mix of providers and logistics. And it's a real challenge for our families in Vermont. I think what we saw under COVID is that it wasn't a challenge just for some families with hybrid and remote learning and not being sure last summer what could be offered. It's been a challenge for just about every family. So something that we've known for years and years and years really just, has come to the forefront. So during the course of the year, we've had really the benefit and the pleasure to work really closely with the Department of Health on how to, have some of the first programs along with childcare last summer, reopening in the summer and helping, to provide care for working families and also to help children and youth start to think last summer about what is it going to look like, right? To eventually be in school, wearing masks and actually what we also saw was often, schools and summer programs or after school working together late last summer and into the fall around what school reopening could look like. So we found that schools that had worked with summer programs after school in the summer actually often were able to more quickly reopen because they'd already, worked through some of those procedures, and families and children were used to some of those processes. We partnered closely with Miranda and her team at the Child Development Division around the school age hubs, which were childcare hubs open in the fall to help with the transition back when schools were still hybrid and remote. So we saw a great need across the state. We were able to set up, what was it, Miranda, 90 something sites, I think, across the state, which was great. And in just a few short weeks, which was wonderful. We were also proud that we were able to do it in a way that didn't compete with existing childcare providers or the existing after school system. So it wasn't about taking all the staff and putting them in one location and putting all the kids there, but really how do we build on the existing infrastructure? We did also see that the existing gaps, many of which we knew about, became even clearer. If there was not already an after school provider, a childcare provider in a community and a space to provide care, it was really hard to start something from scratch in the time that we had. So, and there were some places that we were able to work and eventually find a spot somewhere else in the community and get something going. And there are still towns that we couldn't. It was too big a lift. So those gaps sort of continue with us, right, as a state, and how to go back and fill those. At this point in time, as Morgan said, we're really focused on summer under Kendall Smith out of the governor's office and Monica Hutt and Heather Boucher. We have a cross-sector team that is all about summer. Miranda's on that, Elisa's on that as well. And Laurel from the Department of Mental Health as well as others. The attention there is how we make this connection to recovery and how we help children and youth be back in person. And as Heather said so clearly about the social emotional learning, the connection, the relationships. Throughout the year, we've been talking to young people about what it is they need and what they're missing. And when they speak about mental health, they talk about being together with friends, singing together, playing together, putting on plays, building together, doing robotics, actually in those shared spaces. So that's what this summer is about. It's about hiking and kayaking and exploring and growing in so many different ways. We have a website that we've jointly created called Summer Matters. If you go to vermontafterschool.org, you can find the Summer Matters section. It has wonderful content that we've co-created with our partners around families and how to support families in working with children and how to help them re-engage, especially for children who may be feeling tentative about, getting involved and doing things this summer. So some of the language, a lot of our focus beyond your group here is actually also on teens and adolescents. So there's a whole section for youth around employment. Some of in our rural communities, some of the only jobs that are available might be working in an after school or summer program. And so helping to support our older youth and being able to do that and do that well. And then the other thing I will say about this space and what we've seen in COVID is this growth in partnerships. After school, really by definition needs to partner closely with schools. They need to partner with libraries and rec centers and with museums and artisans in the community and so many others. And this federal funding coming in and the opportunities that we're looking at have really helped to grow and solidify and create these new connections and partnerships. When we're looking at the response to the summer grants, I get so excited and seeing what people are talking about doing and how they're taking this space of summer and maybe combining some reading support with a sailing camp that then goes hiking and then, has the local potter coming in and working with the kids. Like it's really exciting. The priorities for the funding for those grants, just so you know, because they all about access and expanding access. They're about expanding access for around the cost of programs. So summer often costs a lot of money from week to week. So reducing cost for families, creating new summer programs in underserved areas of our state where there are few or no choices, increasing access by adding days or weeks to a program, or increasing slots. So if you had a 3-week program in the past, can we now make it a 6-week program this summer? Or if you were able to serve 30 kids in the past, can you now serve 40 or 50 or 60? Like, how do we make more space in our programs? There's also priorities around expanding access to traditionally marginalized populations, where we usually see lower participation rates, how to increase that, as well as children and youth with disabilities or special needs. So those were all the priority areas. The response has been overwhelming, and we hope later on this week that some of the first awards will be announced.
Thank you so much, Holly, and I'm thrilled to have you join the council table today. It's really critical for us to have a sense of what's going on in spaces that we don't generally hear about, and specifically for the after-school space. This is something we need to be more focused on and figure out how to, at the state advisory council level, engage in a wider conversation about how we support children and families prenatal to age 8. So really happy to have you. And for those who are following along, I did put the link to the Summer Matters at Vermont After School in the chat bar. So please go take a look and reach out to members of Holly's team if you have questions about how to be engaged in this work. All right, so for the next 5 minutes, we'll hear from Ken Jones from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Thank you. Let me first start by saying that there are 3 parts to the agency, and one I will not talk about at all, and that's tourism and marketing. The second is housing and community development, and that's the host of activities that support regional and local planning. The regional planning commissions are financed through that department, and the community development block grant program. So the extent to which those efforts sometimes, and I don't want to overstate success here. I mean, I'm not going to claim that the Agency of Commerce is an absolute critical element to success, especially during COVID. But just to make you aware that community development block grant program is another piece of our agency. The one I want to focus on, the part of our agency I want to focus on the most is the Department of Economic Development, because, and maybe this doesn't sound as friendly as you folks more often are, but we look at childcare facilities as businesses. And as you know, COVID, the challenges for businesses was very dramatic this year. And so we have several programs to support businesses. But even more important in the longer term, the bigger picture is the issue of workforce is probably our biggest topic with regards to economic development. And for childcare, that has 2 pieces. One, the childcare facilities themselves. As you folks know, it's very difficult to get the number of trained workers to provide the services that our state children need. And then the second side of this is that there are many workers that have great challenges of carrying out their jobs because they don't have places for their kids during the day. So for those reasons, we understand the absolute critical nature of early childhood support. And so I want to just run through a couple of the programs that do exist, that are available, have been available. And probably the biggest one is the Economic Recovery Grant Program. Again, this focuses on businesses. And while childcare providers were able to access money specific to childcare providers, many of them didn't, or many of them also received funding through the Department of Economic Development in terms of just straight economic recovery grants. These were intended to provide supplemental funds for those folks who had evidence of significant decreases in their revenue. There will be, in probably about a week to 2 weeks, the next phase of economic recovery grants, but with each phase, they become harder and harder to qualify. And it may be very difficult for especially small child care facilities to qualify for the next round of economic recovery grants. So to the extent that any of you hear of say it will be unveiled fairly soon, and you may hear the rather disappointing response to say, but we're not going to qualify. And at some point, we can talk about the reasons for that. But then the other piece is for in many cases much larger childcare facilities, and that is we provide facilities grants. One of the biggest categories of these is the Northern Borders Regional Commission, and there's a specific grant that we're considering right now for a facility, I believe, in Grand Isle County. When folks want to take buildings, renovate those buildings, and put a community purpose to those buildings, such as a childcare facility, we provide often hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's another program that the legislature authorized this year for other capital infrastructure improvements. So that's, again, for maybe a very limited audience, but these are programs you should be aware of, that when there is a big project to help provide a facility that can provide a large scale service, then that's a place where we're available. But again, what we recognize is while we are strong boosters of the childcare support system, oftentimes our tools are a mismatch. And I'm interested in the discussion later today about, are there ways that we can refine our programs so that they do address what we clearly recognize as a great need, and that's providing childcare services.
Thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate you taking the time to give us a little bit more of the background and what ACCD is prioritizing, and that we really can use this forum as a way of building collaboration and thinking really strategically about how we can leverage cross-sector partnerships to focus on how to prioritize this funding. So now I do want to transition us to take the last 20 minutes of this meeting after hearing so much about what we have right now and what may be on the forefront for Vermont in terms of federal dollars, and brainstorm and discuss some of the major needs and priorities, as well as maybe some of the gaps that we're starting to see appear in our state and federal dollars. So I'm going to transition over to Beth, who's going to facilitate discussions using our idea boards now.
Thanks, Morgan. And thanks, everyone. That was great information to hear, really helpful to have it all in one place. So, you know, as we developed today's agenda, we spent a lot of time trying to determine what information we needed to document around investment needs and gaps in the early childhood system. And a goal for this section of our agenda is to document the investment needs and priorities for agency leadership as they prioritize federal funding coming into Vermont to support pandemic response. So we'll also use this information to support our private philanthropic partners in identifying funding priorities. So we're going to do a screen share. If you are unfamiliar with idea boards, I'm going to walk you through it so you can see what it looks like, and I will describe it, and then we will put the link in.
You're getting a little bit of feedback, sorry.
I will turn off my video. Hear me. I'm going to show you what idea boards look like.
Okay, pause. That's the one thing, because it's unfortunately really causing feedback. Okay, I'm going to jump in for a second and see if Beth's internet resets as she comes back in. So one of the things that we did as we were developing idea boards is divided the sections into 3 major categories for discussion. So one of the things I want you to think about is the first being one-time investment needs. So what are the one-time early childhood investments that we need to be thinking strategically about as we recover from the pandemic? And these may or may not be allowable under the federal guidelines for the ARPA dollars, but documenting them is really important right now. And the second is, what are the gaps or the chronic needs and priorities that we need to fill as we recover and revision our early childhood system? And then what are the barriers to filling those gaps? Beth, do you want to try to jump back in, or do you want me to keep going?
Why don't you finish up? I will put the link in the chat bar.
Perfect. All right, so what you're seeing on the screen right now is an idea board. And so to prepare for today's discussion, we created an online platform to be able to very quickly engage in discussion and using idea boards as a tool to brainstorm in a public context. So the way I want you to view the idea boards that you're seeing on the screen, and Beth is going to place the link to actually be able to edit this idea board in the chat bar, is in columns. So in the left column, you're seeing everything focused on the Department of Mental Health. The second column is focused on the Child Development Division. So within those first two columns, the first row focuses on one-time needs and priorities, and the second column focuses on identifying gaps or chronic needs. What you're seeing in the third column in yellow and orange is really focusing on identifying the broader needs, priorities, or investments that may not fall specifically within the purview of DMH or CDD, but really thinking about identification of any needs, priorities, and gaps across our early childhood system that could be either one-time or chronic in the yellow section. And what you're seeing in the existing yellow section is the development. It's just a starting point for folks to be thinking about what other things to brainstorm. But we pulled these from our regional council tables. So as we've gone and done a tour of our regional councils this year and last year, these have been the top needs and priorities that we've seen appear. The bottom section in orange in the final column on the right is a place to document any major barriers or challenges that we're seeing to early childhood investment. And so there are a couple of examples there. So what you're going to see as you all navigate to the idea board, and Beth just put the link in the chat, is that you will have the ability to create a new idea, vote or support an existing idea that's there, or build out some of the existing ideas and add additional comments. So to create a new idea, and Beth will give an example, you click on the green plus sign, and you can type into the text box that's created. To vote or support an existing idea that you like, you click on an existing bucket, and it should pull up that block and show you a thumbs up signal. If you click on that, it votes. It'll then show a 1 in the bottom left-hand corner. The other thing you can do is add to an existing idea that's there. So if you click within a box, you can then add more text below to give an example or try to build out more of that idea. And then to navigate away from that text box, you just click in any of the white space behind within the idea board. The only thing I want to make sure people don't ever do is click the trash can symbol, because it will delete that entire box. So to click out of that box, you click the X, or you can navigate back to the main screen. So before we kind of turn folks loose, are there any questions on how to use this idea board? All right, so what we'd like to do is take the next 3 to 5 minutes, have everyone click on the link in the chat to navigate to the idea boards, and use this time to start brainstorming and adding content to the board. So again, you could be voting on the existing buckets that are there. You can be adding different ideas to the board, or building out some of the ideas further that are there already. And if folks are having any trouble adding anything to this idea board, what I'd like you to do is in the chat bar, write in your responses and label them one time or gap next to your entry. So for example, if you're having trouble creating a new category and you really want to see something there specific to, for example, housing needs, in the chat bar, write in whether or not you think housing or a specific comment under housing is a one-time or a gap in state and federal dollars. And as we build out these idea boards, we are going to take a few minutes to ask some of our private state advisory council members, as well as other folks who are in the meeting today, to expand or talk about some of the themes that we're hearing as information is entered. So go ahead and navigate to the idea board, and let me know if you are struggling to get into the idea board or have any questions. And
Morgan, quick question, Morgan. Are we just voting that we identify with that need, or is there a certain amount that we're supposed to be voting?
No, I think the more the merrier. If you are seeing a need, I would let you don't have a limit on 5, for example. I want you in your expert hat to go in and say, you know what, these are the top needs that I'm either hearing from my communities, that I as an educator or provider am seeing and feeling across the board. And again, feel free to add to what is there already.
Perfect.
And no, thank you for that question, Robin. We would like everybody who's on the call today to participate in this idea board. This is not just for State Advisory Council members. If you're on the call today and we can disseminate this more broadly, we want you to be engaged in this conversation and to be really providing your feedback on what we should be considering as we're coming into this next year and how we support children and families. Great questions. Keep them coming. For anyone who is just entering the meeting or has re-entered the meeting, we are doing a quick activity through idea boards. I'll place the link in the chat one more time. And what we're asking folks to do is reflect on one-time investment needs as well as other longer-term priorities or chronic needs that we as a state should be considering as we're making decisions around investment in our early childhood system, whether it be using state dollars or federal dollars, or where we have a gap in those needs. And we really need to be thinking more strategically in either aligning our efforts or reducing duplication of efforts.
So I'm going to give folks another minute to, I see you're getting it, which is exciting. We have to get creative when we're working in a virtual space, so thank you. I'll give folks another minute to continue to add or indicate your priorities. And then if there's a private member of the SAC who wants to reflect on any trends that you're seeing or gaps, you can share as well. All right, why don't we finish up with our activity on the idea board and take your hands away from the keyboard, step away, take a look and would love to hear what you're seeing here in terms of any trends, or if there's anything in particular that you want to comment on.
I'll just chime in quickly. Allie, hi everyone. It seems like there's an interesting potential hub between one-time investments that are bridges that lead to long-term investments. So a lot of like similar things identified as gaps and one-time funds. And I think we can be really creative together and understand how one creates a channel into the other. And I see some of those themes arising here.
Thanks, Allie.
And this is Chloe. I just, I keep being surprised at the extent to which the pandemic just magnified or amplified things we already knew or things that were already challenging. And so to not get lost in pandemic mind of like, this is new and different, but ground ourselves in what we already knew. And we have had really good thoughts and ideas over the years. So let's not get lost in that. And Allie, I love your point. Let's use one to get to the other, because we are well on our way, and it'll be a great investment.
Thanks, Chloe. Other comments or ideas?
I would just add to that as well that the workforce is for me right now the biggest concern, because there's so many employers looking for people, and that if we don't hop on this quickly so that we keep the great early ed folks we have right now, we could lose a lot of ground. And so I like that. But then the piece that worries me is that we've got these few years. And so the studies that have been put in place will be incredibly important so that we can pave the future a bit quickly, so that we don't lose ground. I can't say enough how worried I am about the workforce as I look around Vermont right now. I can't go anywhere without people telling me in the grocery store, I can't hire anyone and I'm paying a lot of money, that sort of thing.
I really appreciate you raising that issue, Jessica. And when we look across every single one of these categories, workforce appears in some way or another. So it isn't just about childcare or education. It really is across the entire early childhood system. We are seeing challenges in workforce.
And if we do benefits, or if we could do, I think that those are the things and we've got to study, as much as a lot of people are really tired out, I know, but it's going to be so important that we get ready and we use this money to help us be clear on what it is we need for the future to keep us being successful.
I wanted to underscore that as well. I know we're short on time. The VPA did a survey of our members and had over 100 principals respond recently regarding workforce issues, and it came back as you would expect, and as Jessica is discussing, particularly in traditionally difficult roles and locations in Vermont to hire educators, it's just like that much worse. And with the desire to actually increase support of students, but we're unable to fill roles just like first, second grade teachers and that kind of thing. So it is an issue, and I think there's a one-time opportunity with additional funding to shore that up a little bit, or at least to try with some incentive programs and some recruitment programs. We may not have the opportunity again. And then I would also underscore the infrastructure as a possible investment that is, again, sort of a one-time investment. Buildings can last, 70 years if that money is used wisely. And so when we think about the recurring issues versus one-time investments, I would encourage us to think about infrastructure with this opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mike. I was we're trying across the states, everybody's been talking about infrastructure. Again, the problem is the same, the workforce, that because of the timeline, getting the projects off the ground and having enough designers and builders is going to be really tricky. So we're hoping to get some answers to that, because even, we can move into some things smaller, like sensory gardens or stuff like that, that also do mental health. But for the bigger projects, we are already behind to be able to put them out to bid and fund them. And then to add to the workforce, I see across all the sections an interest in diversifying and equity and inclusion, which is really exciting. And I think that's a great use of one-time money to give incentives to people to move.
Any other reflections on themes that you're seeing opening beyond the State Advisory Council? I know we wanted to hear reflections from our private partners on the board, but to others who are on the call, anything that you would like to quickly mention to the board as you're looking at this list?
I think hearing from diverse voices is really important. We still, when I look around the group, we're not getting at what we're hoping, getting those voices into the room so that they can help us to look at what the future could be. And I know it's hard. We all struggle with it.
That's a really important reflection, Jessica. I really appreciate you bringing that to this table as well. Okay. Recognizing that we only have 2 minutes left, I do want to close by saying, again, none of the gaps that we've identified are new initiatives for the most part. We are seeing our gaps widen during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what's exciting about seeing this list in another way is that we have an opportunity to move from a place of brainstorming to really looking at what funding streams are available across state and federal dollars. And if our priorities are not able to be funded during those specific federal dollar initiatives that are coming into the state, where do we actually need to be looking at the gaps? And can we support our private philanthropic partners in having knowledge and awareness of what these gaps are and help build support in these areas? Where do we as a state need to think more strategically in aligning some of our initiatives so that we can really leverage some of the existing dollars? So one of the things that we will be doing is taking all of this information, we have this documented. We also have the Early Childhood Strategic Plan. And what we're going to do is now take all of this data and information. We're going to reset one of our VCAP committees. So one of our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees called the Early Childhood Investment Committee to work very closely alongside our interagency coordinating team, which is our agency leadership that serve on the board, to really maintain progress on our early childhood investment initiatives. So one of the things that we're going to be working on over this summer and over the next year is a systems analysis for the state of Vermont as identified and specified by H171. And so quick congratulations to all of our early childhood partners who were really involved in getting that bill across the finish line. For those of you who don't know what H171 stands for, we are talking about Vermont's child care bill, but a key component that Building Bright Futures plays in that bill is supporting the systems analysis and hiring a national contractor to join us in doing this systems analysis. And a part of that will be to rebuild the template for our early childhood budget, and then use that budget to actually monitor annually our progress. So what we'll be doing over the course of this next year is using that budget, the Early Childhood Needs Assessment, and the Early Childhood Strategic Plan, or the VCAP, to be documenting all of these priorities and really using this work to help the administration, help the governor, be using that evidence and data to inform decision-making around financial investment for the early childhood arena alongside the legislature. So we really want to thank you for participating today, and just know again that this is not the only opportunity to be engaged in discussions about supporting agency leadership as well as the governor's team in identifying priorities. We will do our best that as every single priority or every single opportunity for sharing your voice comes up, that we'll disseminate it throughout our network, whether it's across agencies or opportunities to participate and engage our private philanthropic community as well. And the last thing I want to know before we end today's meeting is that we will be disseminating later today our BBF Network annual stakeholder survey. It's really important for all of our colleagues on the call today to provide the feedback to us at Building Bright Futures. One, to celebrate some of the major successes we've had in this year, but also to figure out how we strengthen this work in the coming year. So really looking forward to partnering with you all, and really appreciate you coming together today for this discussion. Our next steps are to take all of this information, synthesize it, and give it all over to our agency leadership and really have strong discussions across our VCAP committees to move this work forward. So we really appreciate seeing you this afternoon. Thank you so much.